Hey, it's Ken Conan with the Explore and More show. I've got Mr. Ted Blank with me today. He is the owner of Ted Blank Luxury Travel and Adventures. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Good to be here.
Welcome back.
Yes, I'm back from the Southern Hemisphere. I was gone for a couple of weeks, and through the magic of recording, we were able to put our podcast up every week.
I'll tell you
I don't
what,
know how that works.
It sounded great too.
It did,
Were
yeah.
you just calling in on a cell, I assume?
Exactly. Yeah. No, I call it show prep when I'm traveling. So,
You know what? And it really is.
It really
I mean,
is,
that's
yeah.
official for tax purposes. You're
exactly.
good.
No, I'm totally. Yeah, I keep very detailed records, so I think I'm good.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I think based on your trip, we're going to kind of spin a show or two here. We're going to do a two-parter, and it's going to be around a world cruise or kind of some highlights.
Yeah.
You tell me what world cruises?
Yeah, so a world cruise is an interesting topic, and I think people who are cruisers have probably heard about a world cruise. People who aren't cruisers maybe haven't heard about a world cruise, or maybe they have, because a few of them have kind of gone viral on social media in the last couple of years. But basically, it is exactly what the name implies. It's a cruise where you get on the ship, and the ship sails all the way around the world.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
So almost every cruise line does a world cruise, and they range in length from 90 days. And the one that I was on a portion of actually goes for about 6 months.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, left Miami on January 7th, and it ends in San Francisco in the middle of June.
Wow.
And so it is an amazing, amazing travel experience. And I think we'll talk a little bit about that. And also for folks who maybe aren't up for the whole world cruise right at once, options to break it down into smaller chunks.
I love it. I love it. What an amazing thought to think I'm going to jump on a ship and I'm going to literally see, I would guess, a highlight reel of the world.
Exactly.
Like, am I thinking about that
No, you're
right?
thinking about it exactly right. And so
Nuts.
if you pull out your bucket list and you think to yourself, holy cow, I could check off 75% of this
Crazy.
on one trip.
Yeah.
Without ever having to get on an airplane. Or maybe you'd have to fly to Miami and back from San Francisco. But imagine that. And you know, I think it's intimidating to people to think about being gone from home for that long. But up here in the Midwest where we live, a lot of people head down to Florida in the winter.
Oh, yeah.
And they spend 5-6 months in a little condo down there. And sort of your cruise ship becomes your condo. And the crew and the other passengers become your family.
Right.
And for 6 months, you explore the globe. Or 3 months. There are shorter ones as well.
Wow.
And so the first world cruise, they've been doing them for about 100 years. And
Really?
it was interesting. Yeah, it was during the Great Depression when the cruise lines were the ocean liner companies were trying to think of other things to do with their fleets rather than sail empty back and forth across the Atlantic.
Sure.
And somebody had read the book Around the World in 80 Days with Phineas Fogg and his race around the world, and they decided to try that with the cruise ship, and it was a big hit. And so the cruise line's been doing it ever since then.
Wow. That is amazing. I would have never guessed that it was 100 years old, cruising around the world. I would have thought like, oh, you're going to go across the Atlantic or maybe go across the Pacific, but not the whole globe. That's
and
really
keep in
cool.
mind back in those days, you know, if you wanted to go to Australia, you took a ship.
Sure.
So it might take you 30 days to get to Australia. So,
That's true.
You know, it wasn't maybe quite as intimidating to people when it first started because it just took longer to get everywhere.
Wow. Awesome. My first question, and this is probably a silly one, but I wouldn't even know where to start packing wise. I mean, I feel like a 2-weeker in Europe, I'm almost stressed out. I mean, and this is probably way off topic here, but
no,
what do you,
I think actually
how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think people, they get, you know, you get the idea in your head, hey, this is a really, really cool thing to do.
Yeah.
And then you start to think about all the details. Like my car was sending me text messages saying, hi, Ted, I'm really lonely and your battery is dying. And I was only gone for 17 days. So, you know, you got to think through a lot of these logistical things. And obviously luggage is one of them. And so there are a couple ways to think about that. First of all, there are some ships that I think are really well suited for world cruising, and they have a lot of storage space.
Okay.
So you could bring your stuff, store it. And most cruise ships have laundromats. And the particular cruise I was on with a company called Regent Seven Seas, they have free laundry. So
no way.
Yep. So you put your bag outside and get it back the next day, and your wash is clean.
Now
so you can really
what I'm talking about.
Really limit your packing.
do that.
But you can also have your luggage shipped to you. So let's say, you know, after 30 days, the ship ends up in Sydney, Australia. You could actually have your luggage shipped there. And one of the challenging things is you do go through tropical climates.
Right.
You know, and this particular cruise actually went as far as Antarctica.
Oh my
so
gosh.
you would have to have a pretty good variety of clothing on there. So that's absolutely a consideration to think about. And, you know, how do you pack efficiently for it?
So interesting. Yeah.
And you got to bring a big empty suitcase because you're going to buy a lot of stuff as
Right?
you explore the globe. Even if you only buy one T-shirt in each port, you'll fill your suitcase up.
I feel like I'd be the guy that would be shipping things constantly.
Yep.
Like, ooh, I got all this cool stuff. I'm going to have to ship it at the next port or two.
Yeah,
right? Or
exactly.
whatever.
Yeah, and the cruise, you know, the cruise lines that do the world cruises well, they get that. So, you know, on this particular cruise, the ship's agent would take the mail ashore in every port. So if you had something you wanted to mail, you just, you know, take it down to the front desk and they would take care of the rest for you. So they,
awesome.
you know, they're a very high touch experience, I think, from a customer service perspective to make some of those difficult edges just kind of go away.
What are the other, when you think about a world cruise, what are the other kind of things that are a little bit different than you'd see on just like what I would call a
traditional
weaker
cruise.
traditional.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think the biggest thing is you have a very different outlook on the cruise itself.
Okay.
So if you're on a week-long cruise, even a 2-week-long cruise, you want to take advantage of that time because you know it's a very, very short period of time.
Sure.
So you tend to pack a lot of stuff in there. On a world cruise, the pace is much, much more sedate.
Sure.
You know, if you miss a show in the evening, oh well, there'll be another one tomorrow. If you miss dessert with your meal, oh well, there'll be dessert tomorrow.
Right.
You know, if it's kind of a yucky day and you don't want to get off and go ashore in the port, oh well, there'll be another port tomorrow.
Right.
You know, and with any cruise, there's a mix of kind of those marquee ports that you really, really want to see, and some that maybe you're like, oh, okay, well, it'd be interesting if I got to go there, but the world's not going to end if I don't. So I think you have a much more different perspective on the pace of things, and you also get to know the crew a whole lot better.
Sure.
And so picking a ship that has an excellent crew is really, really important because they're going to be a big part of the experience. And if you don't like the style of service, if you don't like the type of food, if you don't like the accommodations, it's going to be a long time. You know, after a week, you can kind of put up with anything.
Sure.
But for 6 months, you're going to start to be a little more particular about it. And so talking to an expert about cruises and cruise ships when you're thinking about doing something like this is really important.
This seems like something that you and your team could really help, if it was me or whoever, decide and figure out what's going to fit your
style.
Your style,
right? Because it is really critical. And again, on a 7-day cruise, if it isn't a great fit, you know, pick a different one next time and you can definitely do it. But yeah, it is really, really critical. The other thing is there are a lot of things that happen during the cruise. And for example, many cruises will call in Africa, and you can actually get off the ship for a couple days and go on a safari. Or in Hong Kong, you can actually get off the ship and go to China to see the Yangtze River Gorge.
Really?
So there are a lot of like overland programs that are part of a world cruise. And so it becomes a really, really complex series of moving pieces.
So quick timeout. I have to ask you about this. So in Africa or Hong Kong, you can get off, do this amazing tour, and then are you coming back to the boat in port? Or are they getting you back to the boat some other way? Or how does that?
Well, you'll get on the ship in port. Both ways, though. Sometimes the ship will stay in Hong Kong for a couple days.
Gotcha.
Other times you might get off in Hong Kong and get on again in Beijing 3 or 4 days later. So, it's really amazing. And I mean, you think about it, that trip right there, that Chinese expedition or that safari, for most people, that's a single vacation.
Yeah.
And as we're part of a world cruise, you can do 2 or 3 of those things or more. I mean, it really is, you know, from a time efficiency perspective, it's probably the most efficient way to possibly see the world.
Yeah.
But you don't have to fly. And I think that is such a huge benefit to the idea of a world cruise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems to me like it's going to be nonstop. Like when you fly to Europe, there's a day, right? You fly back, there's a day. But you're on a world cruise, like every day.
There's no jet lag.
That's right. You're just like, here we are. And you're just cruising through the time zones as you come across the Pacific or Atlantic or whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you know, the other thing is there are a lot of days at sea built in there because you're going to cover a lot of territory. So you have time to recover. You know, on our cruise, there was one time we had 4 ports in a row.
Wow.
Well, that's a lot.
That is.
And then all of a sudden we had a day afterwards just to kind of, lay back and relax and enjoy the pool and
Nice.
sleep in and not have to traipse around on shore.
I love that. Do you want to talk about your segment that you did?
So we should actually talk a little bit about segments in particular.
Yeah.
So not everybody wants to leap in and take this 3 or 6 month voyage. And I think that's a totally appropriate reaction. But the world cruises are divided into what are called segments. And a segment is just a piece of the world cruise.
Okay.
So the one I was on was 17 days from Miami to Rio de Janeiro.
Okay.
The next one was 34 days from Rio de Janeiro via Antarctica up to Santiago, Chile.
Wow.
Yep. Then the next one was all the way across the Pacific Ocean to Sydney, Australia. So there are all these different segments of different lengths throughout the world cruise. And you can take one of those segments as a standalone trip.
Okay.
And I think that's actually not a bad way to think about experiencing a world cruise.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like you're offered the opportunity to do a sampler. And even if you've been on that cruise line before and you think you really, really like it, it's a different vibe on board that ship. And so I think it is important to maybe give that a try. And, hey, maybe this year we'll take that 30-day piece because next year the itinerary is going to be different. The world cruise is going to do a different itinerary.
Okay.
So maybe that's the way we'll do it. And we'll try this year. And then if we like it, we'll do the world cruise next year, the full one.
Wow. That's interesting. How do you, and I probably know the answer to this, is it reach out to you and your team and you can help somebody understand, here's the segments that are available. How is it from we talk about Alaska a lot and how we need to book at least a year or more in advance.
Yep.
How does that look for a segment with that we're talking about with this world cruise?
So that's an excellent question. So the segments are a little more flexible. They would be kind of about the same booking window as a regular cruise. 12 to 18 months usually will get you a good selection of the segments. The world cruise itself, that might sell out the day it gets announced. So on this particular ship, carried 700 passengers.
You said the same day.
The same day. Carried 700 passengers. Up to 350 of them could be world cruisers.
Okay.
And it filled on day one.
Wow.
So if you're thinking about a world cruise, it's really important to reach out, have a conversation, and know what you want.
Right.
Because when it gets announced, you got to go right away and grab it.
Am I doing the math right here, Ted? So world cruise, there is a certain amount that is set aside for people that are on the entire cruise, and then there's a certain amount that's set aside for segments. Is that
correct?
Fair to say?
Essentially, that's how they do.
Okay, got it.
And if you can find every single segment, if the world cruise is quote unquote sold out, but you might have to move cabins or something like that. So what it is that a certain number of cabins are blocked for people to occupy the whole time.
Makes sense.
And then the rest are just available. And if we can put them all together, then you can do the world cruise. But a lot of times you end up having to move. The other thing to keep in mind, of course, longer cruise, people like more space. So the top accommodations, the suites, the junior suites, those are going to sell out first.
Interesting. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And the segment piece itself, is there a, and I suppose it probably varies, but just want to ask you, how does that work? Is there some segments that are just like a 14-day or some that are a 30? Does it totally vary?
Totally varies. Each cruise has different ones. One of the most common segments that's available on a world cruise is like a Miami, Florida to California Panama Canal passage.
Oh, okay.
So sometimes that's 12, 13 days, sometimes 16, 18 days.
Okay.
Next year, for example, the ship I was on, the Seven Seas Mariner, it's 21 days, Miami to Honolulu. So you go through the Panama Canal, but then you head straight to Hawaii. So there's always a variation.
Got it.
But usually there are some that are about 2 weeks and some that are longer. And of course, you can put two segments together too. So I could have stayed on the ship and gotten off in Santiago if I wanted to, which would have been like 48 days, I think.
Wow. And remind me, how long was your trip?
17 days.
17.
Yep.
And how does that, I know that you are a very seasoned traveler. You've cruised a whole lot more than I have. You're our expert, right? How did that feel to you? Was that getting to the or about ready to be done? Or were you like, oh, I could keep going?
That's actually an excellent question, because I was asking myself that. And, there was a day in there where I was thinking, it was probably day 13 or day 14. I'm like, okay, it's kind of, I may be ready to get home and, get home to my own bed. But then the night before when we were packing up to get off the ship, I'm like, oh, this stinks. I really don't want to get off. I don't really want to cook my own dinner next week and get home. And so, I certainly could have gone longer. And, next year, I think I'm going to look into that 21-day
I love it.
cruise. That would be the longest cruise I've been on. I've been on trips that have been longer, but there may be a cruise combined with something else. But no, I never felt claustrophobic. I never felt like the walls were closing in. I never felt like I was running out of things to do.
Yeah.
I got a lot of reading done, which, you never have time to do that when you're in your daily life, and just kind of decompress. And so I think that's important. And I saw a lot, learned a lot. So no, I never really felt like this is too much.
Love it. Love it. Where would you want to talk a little bit about your segment and where you went?
Yeah.
You want to go there?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So this was a segment on the Seven Seas Mariner, which is one of the Regent Seven Seas luxury cruise ships. And so we started in Miami, and 17 days later, we disembarked in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil.
Wow.
And so along the way, we stopped at the island of Dominica. And Dominica is a small, very small island in the Caribbean. It's an independent country.
I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, it's not too far from like Martinique, St. Kitts, St. Lucia.
Gotcha.
Beautiful island. I mean, covered with forests and waterfalls. They actually have a lot of geothermal power there because they have some active volcanoes on the island. And so we had a chance to go see a couple beautiful waterfalls. And then we went rafting down a river, or like tubing.
What?
Like whitewater tubing.
No way.
Yeah, yeah. And
on
it was
an island.
Oh, yes. And it was amazing. It was so cool. The river was just beautiful, perfect. Like you almost couldn't have designed a better river for the purposes of tubing down it. And, there were some people who were quite a bit older than me, and we just had a blast. It was just fun.
How fun.
And great, they had a lot of people there with us making sure it was totally safe. And, when my tube drifted off and got stuck on a rock, somebody came and rescued me. And so I wasn't left, for the hyenas to finish off. But it was beautiful. The sun was kind of starting to set. Gorgeous island. Wow. Totally unspoiled, totally unvisited place. Yeah. And then we headed south to Barbados, which is a larger island. It's one of the most southernmost islands in the Caribbean. Yeah. And Regent Seven Seas includes complimentary shore excursions, or they're included in the price in every port.
That's a huge deal.
It's a huge deal, especially on a world cruise. I mean, that could really, really add up. And so we had a chance to go to a beach there. Yeah. Beautiful beach, just a nice white sand beach. They set aside some space for us. They had chairs reserved for us and just got to enjoy it. They at the beach.
Oh, so you just showed up and
they took us there by motor coach.
Sure.
And it was great. It was absolutely fantastic.
There's something about having a chair ready for you.
It is.
It's a big deal.
Yeah. Chair. They gave us a nice little rum punch. They make Mount Gay. Mount Gay is the brand of rum they make in Barbados. So little rum punch and a morning at the beach. It was perfect.
That sounds good.
Yeah.